Why do gay men hate monogamy? I know that sounds like a loaded question, and obviously not all gay men hate it. Still, I do think a lot of us struggle with commitment, and I want to explore some of the reasons why. Let me start by saying that if you're a gay man who chooses not to be monogamous, I'm not judging you or looking down on you. I'm just interested in the broader cultural and historical factors that shape our attitudes about relationships. I also want to talk about whether the prevalence of non-monogamy might be hurting some of us, and what that means for our community as a whole. Typically, when I hear gay men talk about hookup culture or open relationships, they'll say things like, "We don't have to live by heteronormative expectations. We're more liberated and can define our relationships on our own terms." I get it. I even agree to an extent. We shouldn't have to follow rules that weren't created for us. But I think that argument sometimes glosses over deeper issues. Many gay men who are constantly hooking up or saying they love non-monogamy still feel an intense sense of loneliness. They want genuine love and emotional intimacy, but don't know how to get it, or worry it's not really available to them. This often traces back to trauma and oppression. Growing up in a society that condemns your sexuality can make you associate sex with shame or secrecy. A lot of us spent our teenage years hiding who we liked, sneaking around, or just feeling like our relationships weren't legitimate. We also missed out on the normal teenage process of going on dates, having open crushes, or bringing a boyfriend to prom. Instead, we might have gone with a good friend who's a girl, or if we did anything romantic with a boy, it was under this cloud of guilt, fear, or secrecy. That's traumatic, and it can cause what some people call a delayed adolescence, where gay men do all their relationship experimenting later in life, in their 20s, 30s, or whenever they come out. So our early adult experiences may be mostly non-committal or casual. On top of that, there's the legacy of the HIV/AIDS crisis. An entire generation watched friends, lovers, and partners die at an unimaginable rate. If you survived that, it made commitment feel fragile, like it could be snatched away at any moment. Some gay men still carry that avoidance of long-term relationships because they unconsciously fear losing another partner. Then came the push for sex positivity as a form of rebellion against the moral panic society had about gay sex. Embracing sexual freedom became not only a personal choice, but also a political statement. Like saying, "You told me my sexuality was dangerous and immoral, so I'm going to be proud of it." As medical advancements like PrEP came along, monogamy wasn't the only way to stay safe anymore, so non-monogamy became even more acceptable. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It's great that we can have multiple partners without living in fear of disease. But it also helps solidify a culture where non-monogamy is so normal that sometimes people default to it without really considering what they personally need or want. There's also the factor of male biology and socialization. Research often shows that men in general tend to separate love from sex more easily. We're more likely to have casual encounters purely for physical reasons, but we should remember that social conditioning also plays a role. Men are often encouraged to rack up sexual experiences, whereas women are discouraged from doing that. Put two men in a relationship and you remove the dynamic that might otherwise push for commitment. Like the way women are often taught to seek out emotional security or monogamy. That doesn't mean gay men can't or don't want monogamy, it just ups the odds that both partners might be more open to playing the field, especially in a culture where they won't be shamed for it. Now, why is all this a problem for some of us? First, there's the loneliness factor. A lot of gay men, especially older ones, embraced a sexually free lifestyle when they were younger, and now they find themselves aging without a partner or a strong family network. That's not the case for everyone. Some have great chosen families or long-term relationships, but many do experience real isolation. Even younger guys who want a committed relationship might feel hopeless about ever finding one because all they see is a hookup culture. They may even participate in it just because it's the norm, even though it leaves them empty or unfulfilled. I also worry about the lack of role models for younger gay men who want monogamy. Thankfully, there are some well-known gay couples out there, like Pete Buttigieg and his family, but in general, we still don't have a ton of famous, long-standing gay relationships to look up to. If you're a kid or a teen coming out, it helps to see examples of lasting partnerships so you know it's possible. Without those examples, you can fall into the same patterns and end up in your 20s or 30s thinking there's no alternative to hookups or open relationships. And let's not ignore the fact that promiscuity and hypersexuality remain stereotypes people use to attack the LGBTQ+ community. We shouldn't have to change who we are just to appease a bigoted worldview, but it is something to be mindful of. With marriage equality and other rights under fire now more than ever, if the broader public only sees us as people who never settle down and just party, that can feed into arguments against our relationship's legitimacy. Again, I'm not blaming gay men for how we're perceived, that's on society's prejudice, but it's worth recognizing that perception does affect us politically. None of this means non-monogamy is always a trauma response or always harmful. There's absolutely such a thing as healthy, ethical non-monogamy. The difference is whether you're choosing it consciously because it genuinely works for you, or whether it's a default you fell into because of cultural pressures, internalized shame, or the belief that a real committed relationship is out of reach. If you're a guy who wants commitment, you're not any less gay for seeking marriage or a stable partnership. You don't have to feel guilty or like you're betraying some anti-heteronormative ideal by wanting that. If a poly or open setup truly fulfills you, that's valid too, as long as it's a decision you arrived at thoughtfully and collaboratively with your partner or partners. Ultimately, I think it's important to acknowledge that a lot of gay men are lonely and crave deeper connection. Yet they feel stuck in cycles of casual encounters or non-monogamous situations they didn't intentionally choose. I'd love for us as a community to be more open about that, to say, hey, it's okay if you actually want monogamy. Here are ways to pursue it. I think being honest about these issues can only help us. It can help younger gay men see different pathways for their future. And it can help older gay men find or build the kind of relationships they need instead of feeling cut off from a stable partnership. That's pretty much what I wanted to say today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think we have a crisis of non-monogamy, or are we redefining relationships in a good way? Do we need to address this for the sake of our mental health and political rights, or is it just another moral panic? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely value different perspectives, so if you think I'm off base or missing something, don't be shy about sharing. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you're feeling isolated, there are community centers, support groups, and mental health professionals ready to help. You are not alone, even if the culture sometimes makes you feel that way. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.